Stay on.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of The Cut. I am your host, Christian Williams, and I am here, as always, with Randy Hall. Randy, how are you, man?
Doing good. A long weekend with Memorial Day. First time in a long time that I actually have that holiday off, and it's not a special tournament or some shit that I have to go through. That's definitely nice. Definitely just barely moved off my couch the other day. I'll be completely honest.
Yeah, hey, that's signs of a good weekend, right? And then back to it tomorrow, which sucks for everyone. But I hope everyone's having a good holiday and had a good holiday weekend. But we are here to talk about football. And tonight we will be talking through the AFC North, kind of looking at some of the fantasy depth charts and kind of what to expect moving forward. Some of these teams that we're going to try to hit every team this summer, and I think we will. I think we figured it out to where we will hit every team. Obviously, some teams have some ambiguity at certain positions, and we're going to kind of try to talk you through that. We're also going to be talking about our Dynasty running back, consensus Dynasty running back rankings tonight. So a lot on the docket. We're going to jump right into it. We didn't put any news. Obviously today, the passing of Jeff Gladney, very sad. I mean, that's 2 in the last month. But condolences to his family and all of his loved ones and things like that. But we didn't put any other news in there. Randy, is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
I think that's kind of like should be able to keep its own segment. Just for outside, that is a very young player. It's on a new team now. It was kind of exciting. The Cardinals secondary at corner wasn't all that great, so he had a really good chance to prove himself there to a better extent, and unfortunately didn't get the opportunity. So,
yeah, and ultimately this was his second chance type of deal because he was arrested, and then the charges were dropped on I think it was a domestic violence situation, and then the Cardinals gave him a second chance, and he was heading right into that. So very sad.
Yeah, worked his ass off to earn a spot here and earn what looked like a starting role as well. So I think a lot of people are really excited to see his elevated play this year, and we just didn't get to.
It's a bummer. But we'll switch gears and go into some AFC North depth chart breakdowns, positional breakdowns, and we're going to start with the Cincinnati Bengals. So we know all of the fantasy performers on the Cincinnati Bengals and all of the riches that they have, and we'll start with the running backs. So right now the depth chart is Joe Mixon, Samaje Perine, Chris Evans, Travion Williams, and Elijah Holyfield. A lot of names that you may recognize that could have been breakout fantasy performers when Mixon went down with injury and then were not. We know what Mixon is, and we're going to talk about Mixon in our rankings here in a little bit on the Dynasty side of things. But behind Mixon, Randy, how are you feeling about this room if Mixon were to go down or even on standalone value?
If Mixon were to go down, I'm not sure any of these guys really could take his load and perform even to some facsimile thereof of his touches with his skill set. They kind of have a mixed bag, and for that, I think Perine and Evans are definitely more third down backs, but Mixon is a pretty good third down back as well. So having those both as your backups, I think, is a little bit overkill in my opinion. And then Travion Williams was drafted after injuries to kind of be the backup to Mixon if he ever go down. And I'm not sure he's ever actually stayed healthy enough to really give him that chance. So I really don't know what we're really going to see from him. I know a lot of people are hyped up when he got drafted, for the handcuff opportunity. Obviously, wouldn't take Mixon's rollover. But for me, I think Perine is clearly the guy to hold because we did see him get a good amount of work in games that Mixon was out. I mean, there weren't a lot, so it's kind of hard to get that full grasp. But I don't think Evans was ready. We'll see where that goes. But I mean, there's no way they carry 5 running backs. They didn't last year either. I believe both Williams and Holyfield were on the practice squad. I think that's kind of going to be the path again, and they're hoping to keep these 5 together. But I mean, for me, I think I would figure out which one I like best between P. Ryan and Evans if I'm the Bengals, and then keep Travion Williams if he's healthy, because I think that's, for me, I always like to kind of diversify and then have like my personal handcuff if I'm the coach that can actually do 50% of what the elite starter would do, and then him and the more receiving back could really at least be passable at the running back position. If that's what they do, I'd be shocked, though. I think they're going to keep just P. Ryan and Evans like they have been.
Yeah. So for me, I think I've seen a lot of talk about P. Ryan in best ball at the end of best ball. And I think that's a fantastic pick because, like you said, when Mixon went down last year for a few games, P. Ryan was the one that got the run. Now, like you also alluded to, it's likely that Evans wasn't really ready for a role like that. I do think that we're going to see an expanded role for Chris Evans this year. I thought maybe the Bengals would add a pass catching type of back, but they seem to like what they have in Chris Evans, and that's pretty much what he will do if he is on the field. So I wouldn't be shocked to see Chris Evans have a little bit of standalone value especially in PPR leagues, as a flyer waiver wire running back a couple weeks into the season, where we see them try to manage Mixon's workload a little bit because of that injury history and because they know that they could be making a deep playoff run. And I don't think that they had planned for that even last year, but that's the one guy. So I think it's interesting because I do think if Mixon goes down, it's still P. Ryan, but I do think that Evans could sneak into some value this year.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, wide receiver room. We know the big guns: Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. After that, though, Trent Taylor, Stanley Morgan, Mike Thomas, Trenton Irwin, and then Puka Williams. He transitioned from running back to wide receiver, and so he is in the wide receiver room. I don't really want to spend time talking about those guys because no one is going to match the production of Jamar Chase or T. Higgins if they were to go down. But I do want to separate. So for you, Randy, how big is the gap between Jamar Chase and T. Higgins? And then furthering that, I guess, between Higgins and Boyd.
I mean, Higgins and Boyd is bigger. I think I can just say that like outright without questioning it. But for me, like I have Chase as my Dynasty receiver 1, and Higgins is, I'll just look at it actually. He's just outside the top 12. So, and I think that's how I view them as well, like just for regular season. Obviously, I think Chase is a top 5 receiver, and I think Higgins is that top end wide receiver 2. Neither are really consistent is the worst part for that, unfortunately. So I think they're definitely be one of my favorite best ball receivers for that reason. But I think you could be happy with both. And then Boyd, I think, is a wide receiver 3, at best. With Mixon being a little bit more healthy this last year, with the possibility of using a tight end again a little bit more this year, with maybe having 3 running backs to catch the ball, those all just eat up Boyd, in my opinion. And while he may be the safe option on third downs or something for Burrow, he'll never get back to what he was because he's never going to touch Higgins or Chase. I mean, it's not a detriment to him. He would be an easy wide receiver 2 on any other team, but he's not getting there in this team.
Yeah, I do think he's like one of those handcuff wide receivers, though, where if one of those two were to go down, I think he's not going to incorporate all of their targets or take over all of their targets. But I do think that would boost his value on a week-to-week basis. And that's why, for example, in best ball, I would want to take him, but not where he goes currently because I do feel him as right. For me, I think T. Higgins is right there. I was wrong on T. Higgins as a prospect. I was wrong on him last year. And so I just don't want to be wrong on him again. I have him ranked. So I have Jamar Chase as my Dynasty wide receiver 2, which we will talk about those next week. But I have T. Higgins right there, wide receiver 6. I think that there's a world where both of them can be super fantasy relevant in an offense that wants to pass the ball quite a bit still, despite having Joe Mixon. So, and I think that's mostly you've got two young stud wide receivers. I wouldn't be shocked if there are a couple years where it's Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp. When they used to like flip flop, it would be Kupp one year, Woods the next, both close to wide receiver ones, one of them a wide receiver one. I know that there's the Chase like chemistry and whatnot, but I could still see it for T. Higgins.
Sorry, fighting again there. The only reason I won't put them both that high is because they're not volume receivers, so they're more big play guys or possession guys. So they move the chains in Higgins' case, and make the jump ball plays, and Chase just makes a play, plain and simple. But that's what he's always done. I think he had like 50 less receptions or 50 less targets than Justin Jefferson in college, and had more yards and more touchdowns. That's Jamar Chase. This is what's going to happen. So he's eating up deep, and the explosive plays, and Higgins is eating up pretty much, all the other big plays. And that's where Boyd kind of comes in as like a little bit of a variance, a little bit across the middle, different stuff like that. But because Chase just goes for the explosive plays, it kind of limits the explosive ceiling for Higgins, in my opinion. That's why I have him slightly lower.
Yeah. No, I get it. I get it. And ultimately, I never felt like I would feel this way about T. Higgins moving forward. But when I was doing my rankings, I said that, I'd rather have him over. We'll talk about the wide receivers next week.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah. Keep moving forward.
I don't want to get canceled before we actually drop the rankings. That's
exactly.
Sure. Tight end room: Hayden Hurst, Drew Sample, Mitch Wilcox, Thad Moss, Scotty Washington. Is Hayden Hurst on your radar for redraft this year? Do you think he has value in 2022?
No, I don't think he is on my radar for redraft, mainly because like Uzama wasn't either. So, right. And he did gain some value through the year. So I think the most likely scenario is the same thing with Hurst this year, where you don't need to draft him, and then when you need a tight end on your waivers, on your buys, he can come in and give you a top 15 week. And I think that's what we're going to be hoping for, just moving forward. Because he's not in – honestly, I don't think he's as dynamic of a receiver as Uzama was last year. So I just don't see a massive upside. He's a better blocker, though. So I think it can help the run game and help this offensive line develop. That's, I think, more of their focal point at the tight end position this year, especially with having the three stud receivers.
Yeah. Ultimately, if he's tight end 1-2 weeks this year, I think you are happy if you have him in Dynasty. Because then
but you're probably not playing him. That's yeah.
Right. Hopefully they're back-to-back weeks and you can flip them for something when someone needs a tight end. But okay, I don't really want to talk about the Bengals anymore. Let's talk about the Cleveland Browns. And so we didn't talk about Joe Burrow for the Bengals because we know Joe Burrow's locked in there. There's no ambiguity there, and we know that Joe Burrow is a quarterback one at this point, based on volume.
Plain simple.
Yeah. So the Browns quarterback situation is a little different. So Deshaun Watson is currently atop the depth chart. We know a suspension is looming. There's a lot of debate on if Baker Mayfield would play for the Browns or if they would force him to play. I am of the mindset that he is not going to touch the field for the Cleveland Browns ever again. And so I don't feel the need to really talk about him personally. Do you feel differently?
The only way it has to be the extreme version, I think, for Baker to be in consideration for him and his camp and the Browns. So if Watson gets like 10 games or the year, then I think it's in consideration for Baker, because if Watson's gone for the full year, which isn't going to happen in my opinion, for this year necessarily, if they delay till next year, who knows? But if he happened to be gone for some like exuberant amount of games, it would be in Baker's best interest and the Browns' best interest for him to play for at least the first half of the season. Just to give his tape, more realistic to his capabilities than the injury season last year. So his trade market can skyrocket. And, maybe that allows him to, when he gets traded, sign a year extension or 2-year extension. Whereas this case, if he got traded, this week for a 6th-round pick. He's not getting extended, and he's fighting for a spot, and he's, going into next season and as a free agent on a worse market. So that's the only way I see him playing.
Yeah. Yeah, see, I don't even see that. I think he's so stubborn that he will say, "No, I don't care. You guys kind of dug the grave, now you have to lay in it." And so and we know that's part of Baker's persona, that's part of his personality. So we'll see how it all unfolds. But either way, Jacoby Brissett and Josh Dobbs are the other two in the quarterback room for the Browns right now. Jacoby Brissett would be in line to start if in most situations, I think. Do you have interest in him as a fantasy quarterback in 2022?
Same kind of situation, yeah. Only for the fact that there's only a certain amount of quarterbacks. So if we're talking like Dynasty or we're talking redrafts and Superflex, I'm definitely interested in having at least 3 quarterbacks in Superflex situations, regardless of format. Just for the fact that you have a bye week, you need the quarterback anyways, and injuries happen. It's just plain and simple. Having a high value backup like that possibly could be a starting quarterback for a length of the season is definitely a high value asset. Though we are hearing rumblings that in the next 2 months or so, we should, by August, we should have a decision on Watson. The validity of those rumors, I don't know, but we hope for fantasy's sake.
Well, and the latest reports are that the NFL's investigation is concluding, and so they should be able to kind of sit with that information over the next month. Yeah. I think we'll know before the end of June.
Well, to specify, the NFL investigation is the only thing that's leading to the suspension, because civil cases in general won't ever lead to a suspension.
Right. Correct. Sometimes, but the NFL kind of are. Yeah, the NFL is taking it into their own hands, which probably a good idea because those cases are going to go a long, long time. So, okay,
it's criminal cases lead to it's verbatim because you're probably going a house arrest or away. So that's why that can dictate the suspension. Whereas civil cases, the NFL is just leading on their investigation alone, as well as obviously the information from the cases. But
right, for sure. I don't have a ton of interest in Brissett for 2022, other than to have an extra quarterback that I can play in deep dynasty or in any dynasty league. Really, he should be rostered. He should be on a team.
Yeah, if he's starting games, he has a really good chance to be quarterback 2 every week. He'll never, in my opinion, crack the quarterback ones, especially because if he is taking the reins for an extended period of time, that's only going to increase the usage for Chubb and Hunt, and decrease the usage for the lackluster receiving core.
Yeah, which we'll talk about in a second.
Let's go.
Yeah, so let's go to the running back. So Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, Deante Johnson, Demetric Felton, Jerome Ford, and John Kelly. I think Kelly is definitely the odd man out. I think Demetric Felton could also be the odd man out in this room, which to me is crazy, but they did just draft Jerome Ford with a decent draft capital at 4th, 5th round.
5th round. So for me, I think if they put Ford on their practice squad, there'd be a better than good chance he gets picked up by someone else. So I think they try their best to roster them. I will say most weeks last year, they had 4 running backs on their roster every game. So for that reason, we're basically saying Kelly's cut. Who's the odd man out? It probably isn't the new guy unless he comes in and doesn't play to what we think he will. I mean, I think this is probably one of the best fits for Ford coming out of the draft. So in that case, I think talent-wise it would have to be Felton. But the problem with that is we look at the receiving core, and you have really 5 receivers that you would want to name. And Felton is kind of a mixed bag receiver running back. So do you keep the 5 and only keep 5 receivers and count him as, a 6th receiver instead is the question. I think the bigger question is Deante Johnson trade bait, or is, Kareem Hunt trade bait? I think that's really the question more than because if Felton got cut, we wouldn't really discuss it here. You know what I mean?
Right. And so the Kareem Hunt point is very, very valid. Kareem Hunt is going to be a free agent after the 2022 season, or he has an out in his contract, I believe. I think
Yeah, but
he's so
I,
expensive that
I was
I
gonna say
can't.
odds of him getting more on the market though. That's the thing. If
Right.
it's a player out,
I
you
think it's
know,
a team
if
out.
it's a
I
team
think,
out, then it's a question mark. But
and ultimately, you look at what the offense will be when Deshaun Watson is there, and it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be let's turn around and hand the ball to Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt because Deshaun Watson
oh,
won't like that, and they just paid him a lot of money to like what they're doing. So I do wonder if Kareem Hunt is on the trade market right now, he's on the trade block at least. Nick Chubb is solidified. He got his extension.
yeah,
He
there's
is there.
no
He's a
no
Cleveland
question.
Brown until he retires. I would guess. Um, or
If
close to it.
for So to break it down for my personal team building philosophy, I would be looking to see what I can get value wise for Deante Johnson, simply for the fact that again we're not shredding Watson right now. When you look at that receiving core, you have your top dog and Amari, and we'll kind of transition right away here. You have Grant as your veteran piece, and then you have young possible studs and DPJ, David Bell, Schwartz. So when you look at the receiving core, I don't think it ensues confidence in the passing game with Deshaun Watson. So I think this year is still another full tilt, two running back monster attack with a transition to more pass happy with Watson under center if that is the case. And that's why I do think they retain Hunt this season.
Yeah, it could be. They did start to transition to that pass happy stuff over the back half of last year, which was interesting because Baker was hurt and clearly not playing well. I am all about the conspiracy theory that they did that on purpose to knock his value.
Makes no sense though.
Well, it doesn't now, but when they were going to have to pay him, it did. But anyway, let's move into the wide receivers. I don't want to get into Brown's conspiracy theories.
Thank you.
You just mentioned it. So Amari Cooper, Jakeem Grant, Donovan Peoples-Jones, David Bell, Anthony Schwartz, Jamarcus Bradley, and Javon Wims. And so they added Wims it was kind of an under the radar piece this year. I think he has a pretty good shot to be that sixth wide receiver this year if they do keep a sixth wide receiver. Jamarcus Bradley had some good snaps last year for what it's worth. He was actually more consistent to me than Anthony Schwartz was out there, but they're going to give Anthony Schwartz every opportunity to develop, and that's important to remember.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate for Wims. I think he's going to have a good preseason, and I think he's getting cut because Bradley, if they only go 5 receivers, Bradley's a practice squad dump that they can keep. That's basically it,
And offers more on special teams
Exactly.
than
So
Wims will. So
yeah, and Schwartz offers special teams, so he's staying, and they
yeah,
drafted him too high anyways. So like that top five's locked in, and there's a good chance they just do that top 5 with how much 12 personnel they do necessarily run. I don't think they necessarily go away from 12 personnel this year by any means, but it could be 12 personnel with a little bit more shotgun looks than under center.
Harrison Bryant is better than all of their wide receivers outside of Amari Cooper. So
I'm not on board with that.
Who do you think's better? Do you think David
think
Bell is
they're
the
all
second
better.
best? You do?
If lining up at wide receiver, yeah.
Oh no, I don't mean that. I just mean as an overall player and a piece that you can use on the field. I think talent for talent, bar for bar, Harrison Bryant is the
I
second
think
best.
Grant has a chance. He's shown electricity through the years. I think
agree.
DPJ is obviously a physical freak and an elite talent that really has never taken a next step since coming to college. So whether this is a ceiling or not is up for questions. David Bell is a consistent threat, and Schwartz is, fast. So I think he's definitely better than Schwartz, and I think you could give the nod right now over I understand giving the nod over Grant, DPJ, and Bell just because we haven't seen it in the scheme or really consistent level when you talk about Grant. But Bryant hasn't also been that consistent either, but that's mainly because he was the third tight end.
Yeah, which is a good transition. So over to the tight end room. David Njoku just signed a massive extension. He's the 5th highest paid tight end in the NFL. He is there to stay. fantastic signing. That was part of news probably, but
it's a bit much.
To me, as it ages, it's going to be a fantastic signing. We kind of look at the lifespan of that deal, and also David Njoku was a top 12 tight end last year based on blocking, based on everything that he does. Maybe not pass catching; he still wasn't fully consistent, but I think he will be with the change in quarterback. Harrison Bryant then follows him. He is now the tight end 2. Austin Hooper is gone. After that, it's a bunch of crap. So Miller Forrestall,
literally
Forrestall, and he'll probably be the tight end 3, and then a bunch of guys that I honestly have only heard of one in the last one here, Santos Silva. So obviously the 3 tight end looks aren't going to be there this year, I don't think.
No. But that's part of the transition of the offense, though.
Right.
Well, it doesn't necessarily transition away from running. It transitions to having the other receiver on the field instead of the 3 tight ends, because I do think they only keep probably 3 tight ends this year.
Yeah. Is David Njoku going to be a tight end 1 in 2022? I know it's early. Because I think so.
No.
Okay.
Only because we have returning people like Irv Smith, and I think he has a chance to. I think he's probably tight end 1. And when we get to that next week, I think we run down the list of the Dynasty rankings. Maybe we can break it down a little bit further. Obviously, if Gronk doesn't come back, this helps out Njoku. It just cuts out one of the guys that's there. So we'll see.
Yeah. Njoku is my Dynasty tight end 12. I'll just spoil that one. So
you're insane.
I've always been high on Njoku. He's a talented player.
He's my 15. So and this was we did these before the extension. I think I wouldn't really move him up, just seeing who's ahead of him. But that's because he's never been the one, though. So
yeah,
in theory.
Yeah. All right. Just a little bit of insight, and we'll give some more predictions for 2022 as the summer goes on. But just kind of looking at face value right now. Next team, the Baltimore Ravens. Running back situation is weird. So they signed Mike Davis this offseason. They drafted Tyler Beatty. They have J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards set to return at some point in 2022, maybe not for week 1. And so I think that's the reason they've added to the room. They also still have Justice Hill, and they've got a couple guys that aren't going to make the roster.
These fuckers are making the roster. I'm telling the Ravens aren't cutting running backs or corners to the last fucking day. I'm telling you that right now. They're done with that last year.
So J.K. Dobbins, obviously, the dynasty outlook for him is a little weird right now because we haven't really seen it outside of little spurts when he was spelling Mark Ingram and then he got hurt early. How are you feeling about J.K. as we head into 2022, Randy?
Yeah, so heading into last year, he was back end 1, I would say, for most people. I think right now the highest you're going to see him is a middle RB2 for dynasty rankings. I believe I have him right in that area. He has immense talent, and this is a perfect scheme for him. He just hasn't been fully healthy except for his rookie season, really. This is, third year, so we're not talking that big a deal. He was a little bit banged up his rookie year as well, but he got a lot of touchdowns, and he was really in a mixed backfield as well then. So I do believe if he's healthy and playing every game, he is going to be an easy RB2, if not RB1 every single week, just because of this offense. And we've always seen Gus Edwards kind of cut in and get his and, get a touchdown here and there, but he's never really ate too much away from the top dog at the running back position to make it matter. And with Beatty coming in, I do think he has a chance to just eclipse the Gus bus because he is that talented, but Edwards has actually shown it. I do think they do love Justice Hill. They brought in Mike Davis as a veteran body. I think he gets cut as well. I think they roll 4 running backs, and that's Dobbins, Edwards, Beatty, and Hill.
Yeah. I would guess that Hill – I know they like him, but I would guess that he would be the odd man out, and they keep Mike Davis because of just more durability. But we're just a year away from Mike Davis being drafted as an RB2, and now he's probably his team's RB4 at best, maybe getting cut. So,
Jesus,
so yeah, and I will say, go ahead.
I was going to say it's Nate McCrary and Ricky Pearson, so not really any running backs of consequence, I would say. So that's why I think Justice Hill kind of keeps his role, because I think they keep 4. Yeah. I just don't.
If you think
I don't
Mike
think
Davis
I just think they have him as a veteran presence in case the top 2 dogs aren't back. That's the only reason they signed him.
Is a very reasonable. It's reasonable to assume that both Gus and J.K. Dobbins start the year on the pup. Can come off after a couple weeks.
We'll see. We really haven't seen that much news, and we won't till at least next month, or at least July, I should say. It's technically still May.
Yeah. There was an end of May joke that we should talk about off air that I saw on Twitter today. Okay, so the wide receiver room looks a little bit different. Marquise Brown obviously shipped off to Arizona, and so now Rashad Bateman looks to be the wide receiver 1 for the Baltimore Ravens. You know, we like that here on this podcast.
And I love Hollywood.
True, yeah.
I love that guy, but I'm glad Bateman – Hollywood never fit this team. Bateman actually does.
Yes, absolutely. After that, there's a lot of battles going on. So Devin Duvernay has flashed at times. James Prochet has also flashed at times. I know. We both love Duvernay. I love Prochet. And then I love Tylan Wallace's talent, and he was underdrafted compared to what I thought he should have been. And then after that, you've got Jalen Moore, Benjamin Victor, Mekhi Polk, Slade Bolden, Devin Williams, Shamar Bridges, Trayvon Clark, and Raleigh Webb.
Basically, the question is: we know the top 4 are on the team. We know that Bateman, Duvernay, Prochet, Wallace are all locks. Who is the 5 and 6 in your mind? Because I don't think they keep more than 6 out of this.
So they
drafted group.
Yeah, so they drafted Mekhi Polk. So I think that he will make the team, even if it was day 3. I think it was around 6 or 7 pick. And then I have a weird feeling that they're going to keep Slade Bolden. But the problem is Devin Duvernay and James Prochet. I think Prochet can play a little bit more Z with Bateman being your X and then Duvernay being your slot.
Yeah, he's the clear slot. There's no question here.
Right. But do they feel that they can get slot production from one of the other guys like Tylan Wallace if he were to go down? That's why I think they might keep Slade Bolden over Devin Williams. Devin Williams is a big body guy out of Oregon. He was a talented wide receiver. I think he would be my pick, but I think they'll go with Slade Bolden.
Yeah, so I was thinking Polk is kind of the lock as well. And then Slade or Williams and kind of Bridges as well was who I was thinking of possibly getting the shot. We have it laid out here as the actual, our lads has as the depth chart. So they actually right now have Jalen Moore and Benjamin Victor ahead. I don't know why.
Well, and Victor's,
but
Victor's had some actual NFL snaps.
Yeah.
Not good ones, though. I mean, he's really not that good of a wide receiver.
In reality, there's probably a different receiving room that's going to be cutting a 6-year, 7-year vet that probably takes one of these spots as the wide receiver 5 of this team. They've kind of always gone for that guy as well after the initial purge of mini camps and everything.
So Hollywood Brown was a wide receiver 1 last year, right? Back end wide receiver 1.
Yeah, he was like top
12.
5 for the first 7 weeks or something.
Yeah. I think that's on points per game because I think he did get hurt, didn't he, down the stretch?
Yeah, but I'm saying to start the year, he was a top 5 receiver.
Right.
For the first half.
What is Bateman's ceiling?
Wide receiver 1, not the wide receiver 1, but a wide receiver 1.
Okay.
And it's because, obviously we're going to get to tight ends here, but Andrews is obviously hyper targeted in this offense. I think Bateman will also be hyper targeted. And I think Duvernay is going to do better than people think. So I really don't see – this is one of those scenes where there's not enough mouths out there to feed, unlike the other way around for a lot of other teams.
Right.
So I do think Bateman is going to be a wide receiver too, but will have every opportunity to be a back end one.
Yeah, his value in Dynasty, he should have jumped on it before the trade. Who would have thought the trade would come? But you bet on talent, should have bet on the talent. We'll get to some more debates on this wide receiver room because I actually think James Prochet takes the wide receiver 2 role in terms of targets because he profiles most like Marquise Brown. So I think he gets that type of role.
So he could, but Duvernay is more of a like Lamar favorite, and the slot role is a better fit for the offense. That's why I would go there.
I get it, and that's going to be a point of contention, I think, for a lot of fantasy analysts this summer. So I can't wait to dive into that as the summer goes on. Tight end room really quickly. Mark Andrews is the staple. He is the tight end 1, but they invested pretty heavily in their tight end 2, 3, 4, and freaking 5. Nick Boyle apparently is a cut candidate. From what I've heard, his knee is not great. He can't really run at this point, and so that's why they drafted Charlie Kohler and Isaiah Likely. They also have Josh Oliver and Poyen from last year.
Got some of our favorite tight ends in this room to watch.
I know.
Not necessarily grades, but
yeah. Well, Kohler after his RAS, he ended up in my top 3, I think.
I mean, obviously Kohler and Likely are kind of locks for this team. There's a good chance they might keep 4 though, so that's the question.
I think Oliver's
Poyen is the better blocker by far. That's the thing. So True. It's kind of like, do you want Oliver, who's similar in style of like Kohler and Andrews, or do you want the blocker? And I think the blocker generally will win out more for special teams as well, but we'll see.
Yeah, and if Andrews were to go down, I think Charlie Kohler steps right into his role, and you don't miss too much. I think he's a weekly tight end 1. So I think that knowing that going into 2022 is kind of important. There's a chance that that's likely, though, because he's a good pass catcher as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, with Likely, don't be surprised if he's just put in randomly at different packages as an extra receiver because and this is why when we talked about, like Benjamin Victor being more in like different bigger body guys for the Ravens, I don't think they're going to care because I think that's why they drafted Likely.
Yeah. They want to get back to their Lamar won his MVP when they had 3 tight ends on the field primarily. And so I think they want to get back to that a little bit. Okay, let's get over to the Steelers before we get to our dynasty running backs. So the quarterbacks, we have to talk about that as well. Obviously, we didn't have to for the Ravens because of Lamar, although Tyler Huntley's still there. And if Lamar goes down, Tyler Huntley has some value, but don't worry about
but we're not really going to – we're going to only talk about the rooms that really have discussions like that. We know Huntley's the backup, probably most likely, and we know his role in case Lamar was down. With Browns, there was discussion, and obviously with the Steelers, there's big discussion.
Yeah, so right now, Mitchell Trubisky, then Mason Rudolph, then Kenny Pickett on the depth chart, on the official team depth chart. Obviously, we know that Mason Rudolph is not going to be ahead of Kenny Pickett for very long if we've watched Mason Rudolph play. But the question, Randy, do you think Kenny Pickett starts week 1? Because I don't. I think Mitchell Trubisky is going to win the job and keep it for a little while. Personally,
I'm going to say no as well. That's tough, though, because I don't think Trubisky's that good. I think they're about the same level right now, just one has NFL, experience. So in theory, he gets the nod. But if they're that close, and that's what we see during training camps, OTAs, mini camps, and preseason, Trubisky's not going to be the starter. If they're close, Pickett's getting the job.
Right. I think there's a world in which they're not super close in those situations, though.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a world where Trubisky is a good step or two ahead of Pickett coming into this season. So, and I think that's what we're kind of predicting right now. But, I mean, we're also expecting Trubisky to have improved in play while sitting on a bench.
Yeah.
So, that's why it's still an up-in-the-air situation.
Where I feel more confident in that, though, is Trubisky needed to improve here, And I think being in a room with someone as smart as Josh Allen and who figured it out because he also needed work up here and then he fixed
Yeah.
up here. I think that that's going to matter a little bit more than a traditional like rehab stop for a quarterback. But we'll see. I mean, Trubisky's got to prove it on the field, and so does Pickett.
Yeah.
So,
but we've also seen with a second chance veteran quarterback them come out and be ultra safe as well. And while this team can thrive with that, with the weapons that are there, I don't see them wanting to be extra safe after having to deal with, Big Ben's noodle on for the last 2 years. I think they're really trying to, jumpstart this offense a bit and not have to lean on Najee to absolutely carry the first two downs. You have one of the best receiving cores, and you can't you can't just sit back on it now. I mean, obviously, like top wise, like top two, they're not the best. I'm not arguing that, but with the rookies that they brought in, this is one of the more electric receiving cores for the future, especially at a young pace. So that's why I think, they may just say, fuck it. We drafted him in the first for a reason. I don't know what that reason was, but they might just roll with it.
Yeah, it could very well happen. Over to the running backs, you mentioned Najee Harris being the clear RB1. I think Benny Snell had some good film last year. I'm still gonna, I think he's the clear RB2 here. Anthony McFarland hasn't done anything, and he didn't do anything last year despite Matt Canada coming over. He coached him, so people were in on him. Be completely out on Anthony McFarland. I wouldn't be shocked to see him cut. And then one of the Edmonds brothers is also still there. I don't remember which one.
Basically, it's Harris and Snell. Then you don't have to care. That's what we're getting at.
Right. And I will say, so let's jump over to the wide receiver room because then we can talk through what I think could happen. So Deante Johnson, Chase Claypool, George Pickens, Calvin Austin III. That's where I think something could happen. Anthony Miller, Miles Boykin, Steven Sims, Gunnar Olszewski, Cody White. How did I get Olszewski right the first time? First read, that was pretty good. Tyler Vaughns and Tyler Snead. Tyler Snead, kid out of, I think, Eastern Carolina, rookie.
Sounds right.
I feel like he could be a sleeper to make the team at the very least, but probably not with what they've brought into this room. Really quickly, before we get into the wide receivers, though, I think Calvin Austin could be a sub-package running back. He's a small type of dude. I think we could see a Tariq Cohen-like transition to the running back position. I think he can win as a wide receiver, and I think that they will deploy him in that way. I just think that they could use him as a weapon rather like a gadget type of guy.
Yeah, I agree. He has that capability, and I think that just further speaks to how out we are on the 3 and 4 running backs of the Steelers. I think they're both gone, in my opinion. I think they more than likely take a shot on someone that's cut by a different team to have like an upstart third guy to fight for the starting role if something were to happen to Najee. Or maybe just a pure pass catcher if that was out on the market. That's why I think both of those have a chance to be gone. Otherwise, Edmonds is gone, and they'll keep McFarland because they have a longer deal with him. Deante and Claypool are a top-end wide receiver duo. This team is going to run 12 personnel a decent amount as well. So they will do a lot of just 2 receiver sets. The question becomes, I mean, in 3 wide receiver sets, is it Pickens or is it Austin? That's basically where it comes into play because Deante, while he has more possibly of a frame of more of a slot, he's an outside receiver. So if you're going 3 receivers, you can't put – I mean, you could put Claypool in the slot as a big slot, but in my opinion, he does great going deep, but Pickens also does really good at that. So it's a weird situation, and that's why I think your point of Austin being like a gadget third down running back at times, obviously Najee being a good pass catcher, so it's not really mattering. But if you can get all 4 out there on an obvious passing down and make an utter mismatch, at least for someone in the middle, I think that's a great idea.
Yes. So I do think that they're going to move Claypool back into a role that he played his rookie year, which was that big slot where they used him as a
touchdowns only.
Right.
That was his rookie year. It was touchdowns only.
Yeah, and handoffs. I mean, he got a lot of those like little jet sweep handoffs, and
Hey,
they used his athleticism.
yeah,
Um,
give it all to him. I don't want that shit going to Deante at all.
no, absolutely
I
not.
don't want him running the ball at all, man. That's the only times he got fucking hurt. I fucking hate it.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, so Deante Johnson for me is a top 7 dynasty wide receiver. I think
God.
they will get a deal done with him. I am a little concerned based on um, how they kind of invested in the wide receiver room, kind of maybe shaping up for a world where they lose him as well. But I think they're going to get a deal done. I think Deontay is going to be the favorite of Kenny Pickett moving forward and for a
Yeah,
long
of
time. So
course.
I feel very good about him moving
He's by
forward.
far and away the wide receiver one. I think their draft in the wide receiver market this year was a little bit of value, first off, because those guys are both values of picks. But
Yeah.
it's also them knowing they can't pay both Claypool and Deontay. And I think they're going to, with these picks, I think it speaks to them paying Deontay.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be sooner rather than later with the market or with their cap situation, with having the young running back, young quarterback. I think they pay Deontay now, let Claypool extend, tag, walk when that time comes, and you have the replacements. Worst case, you have an expensive receiving room, but you have the best receiving room in the football because
Yeah.
Pickens and Austin are good. I don't really think Anthony Miller I've liked, but he's never been healthy. He's never really gone past anything. We know Gunner is keeping a spot in this team because he's a special teams ace.
Yeah.
So besides them, when you have 5 receivers locked in, with Gunner being the 5th, not necessarily as a wide receiver, but I don't really care them having 10 receivers. Who else is going to make it? Honestly, it's just they're never touching
Yeah.
the field. Or
Yeah.
if they do, it's not going to matter.
I'm intrigued by Boykin because they claimed him when the Ravens put him on waivers. And so I think that
Yeah,
he might be the 6th. I think he could make it over Anthony Miller, actually.
probably
But
will.
it's going to be a battle to see who makes the squad. I think Calvin Austin offers something in special teams to where you feel like you might be able to move off of Volshevsky because that signing happened before the draft. They didn't know they'd have Calvin Austin. That
I
could
would
be the
rather have
case, but
both if I'm them. But
exactly. Yeah. I think he's pretty much a lock to make the roster. Let's move into tight ends really quickly before we're almost done here. Pat Fryermuth is the tight end 1. Is he a tight end 1 for you, Randy?
right now, back end I would go with. He
Fair.
has the youth to be like I have him as a tight end 1 for Dynasty, just with the youth and
Right.
usage that we've seen from this Steelers room. So I do think there's a great chance of that. However, for this season, again, there's so many new avenues with David Njoku being given the lead, with Irv Smith coming back, with Dalton Schultz getting more of a free room now as well. There's more, and then Dawson Knox being knocked down from top 5 with OJ Howard possibly coming in and taking some snaps. So there's a lot of mixed bag at the tight end position. And then you have like Zach Ertz, who was basically a top 12. Now he's got competition and a young stud. So what happens? I think he has one of the best chance to leap into that position, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair. You mentioned they might run some 12 personnel, so these guys matter, but they don't. Zach Gentry, Jay Sternberger, they're taking a shot on him after his DUI and like getting cut by the Packers, and really just disappointing career so far
Yeah,
for what we thought he would be. Kevin Rader, and then they drafted Connor Hayward to play with his brother Cam, which was pretty cool. They are very much a Steelers family, and I hate that I have to hate this squad
I
because that's
think
cool.
I actually do think Connor is almost a lock to make the team
Yes.
because what we've seen from him as an effort standpoint, I don't think there's any way that he's not playing as a special teams guy. So I think they probably keep 3, and it's Fryermuth, Gentry, obviously, in my opinion, is the tight end 2, and then
Yeah.
Connor Hayward.
I think that they're going to add the tight end room and Gentry will go after.
That could be, but Gentry's been better than people really think because he doesn't catch passes really. That's the difference. But he's been a
I
good
know
tight end.
he has for
And
sure.
for some reason always gets really good cards and mutt for Madden. I don't understand it.
There
People
you
love
go.
him.
That'll do it. All right, and that will do it for our AFC North depth chart breakdown. Just kind of an early dive into some of these depth charts and what we think could be fantasy relevant, what might not be fantasy relevant, values and things like that. And we're going to do this over the course of the next few weeks, trying to break down every division and talk about every single team as we get into the 2022 NFL season, which is just shockingly right around the corner now. We've got 3 months before, less than 3 months before training camp. So it's nuts. But all right, we need to get into our Dynasty running back rankings. And so we'll just kick it right off. We'll just go right into it. 1 through 12. Jonathan Taylor's our RB1, 2, DeAndre Swift, 3, Christian McCaffrey, 4, Najee Harris, 5, Breece Hall, 6, Javonte Williams, 7, Austin Eckler, 8, Joe Mixon, 9, Saquon Barkley, 10, Nick Chubb, 11, Dalvin Cook, 12, Alvin Kamara. Randy, what are your thoughts on this group? Is there anything that stands out to you? Is like we're way off? I did not add us versus ECR this time around, so
you bitch.
I know.
I personally, I still have Derrick Henry in the top 12. I have him at 12, but I still have him there. I don't know who.
As do I.
Who do I not have? Oh, I'm
Chubb.
so confused. Nick Chubb's at 11 for me, so I don't know what I did, but either way, I'll figure that out later. But Breece Hall, I have at 6, so him being at 5 overall here is good with me. Yeah, I think he's the one that stands out here because he's the young gun. He hasn't done anything. He's on the shit team in theory.
It's Saquon that you don't have.
Oh yeah. I have Saquon way lower. Why is he up here? Thank you for that. Me? I just skipped him because I didn't even care about him. But for Breece, I think he's the clear 101 in rookie drafts right now, super flex or not. So he was easily going to be a top 10 running back for me. The opportunity for him there with being kind of a split backfield anyways, I still have him at 6 because of the age, and a lot of these guys are going to be reset pretty quickly. So while for this season, I obviously think Breece Hall will probably finish lower than Nick Chubb, than Eckler, than Kamara, than Dalvin Cook, than Joe Mixon, than Derrick Henry, than possibly Cam Akers and David Montgomery, like Aaron Jones too. Like he might be way lower than all of them. He's probably a middle, top end RB2, middle of the road, just because of how bad that team is. In theory, teams surprise us every year. So at this point, I won't go against it. But and he's a good pass catcher, so he should be able to split that role a little bit with Michael Carter, which is good for him. But he could really, with his talent, he could come out and really break out this year. And for that reason, I have him higher. I think he's the highlight of this group because everyone else, I think, is an obvious RB1.
Yeah.
Besides Barkley.
Yeah. That's fair. I mean, I have Saquon at 9, so I'm kind of the one pushing him up. I still believe in Saquon. I think that Saquon's dynasty outlook very much so depends on them getting a good quarterback next year or them trading him and kind of getting rid of him. But I do think that good football is in front of him. He has been injured. He has had one of the most what-if careers thus far that I can remember, just with how he was regarded as a generational talent. Breece isn't that, but Breece absolutely deserves to be on this list. He's my RB4 in Dynasty. I feel very, very confident that Breece Hall is going to have multiple RB1 seasons. Yeah. And I do find this list interesting because it's basically young guns on the left, and then we packed in the older guys on the right side. Although I would I would actually fit in some of the some different older guys. So let's get to our 13 through 24. So 13, Antonio Gibson, 14, Derrick Henry, 15, Cam Akers, 16, Aaron Jones, 17, Ken Walker, 18, Josh Jacobs, 19, J.K. Dobbins, 20, David Montgomery, 21, Ezekiel Elliott, 22, Elijah Mitchell, 23, Travis Etienne, and 24, Miles Sanders. So the older guys that I was talking about, I think Aaron Jones has a few good years left. I think Derrick Henry has a couple good years left, and I would still rank them as back-end ones because I think that they could finish as top 5 guys over the course of the next 2 years. So I would feel comfortable about them retaining their value. and you being able to flip them for some of the younger guys that may not reach their max potential. Randy, what do you think of this list?
Yeah, I have J.K. Dobbins, Dave Montgomery at like 16 and 17 for me. I ranked Saquon Barkley at 15 personally. I do have Akers and Gibson as the top for me. Honestly, like I have ETN a little bit higher. That's about it. I also have Fournette in my top 24. And I think that's really catapulted by this year and potentially next year, but I don't give a shit because it's running back. So a year to 2 year window, he's clearly going to be an RB2 this year. So having him as a back end RB2 for me is pretty much a lock. And I also have Josh Jacobs at 24, which, as being the Raiders fan here, makes this fun that I'm way lower. This is how Raiders fans are.
It's
We
interesting to
self-hate.
me. We'll talk about that as the season goes.
Yeah, Josh Jacobs is lower for me just simply because it's a three-headed backfield now. While he's clearly the lead back, I think he's the lead on touchdowns. For a dynasty outlook, the optics of him not getting the fifth-year option and the optics of getting a more of a bruising running back in, I think is not good for his potential future. That doesn't mean he doesn't catch on somewhere else. That doesn't mean he doesn't stay, but I just have him lower on the list simply for that reason.
Do you think that he will walk into a starting role next year, though?
Yeah, probably. But I don't know where
too.
it's at, and I don't know the splits. So when you have those kind of question marks and the kind of backs that are coming out next year as well, that's, again, in theory, in hindsight, I should have Josh Jacobs ahead of Fournette. But other than that, I'm fine with where he's at for me.
Yeah. I have Leonard Fournette at 23. So I feel similarly in that, like, I do think that he is a back end too, but I do feel very confident in a guy that will make the top 36 that they just drafted and being a fantasy relevant performer. I know I'm kind of out on a limb on that. I think he's got some truthers, but some other notes from the 13 through 24. Obviously, we talked through J.K. Dobbins a few minutes ago. I'm shocked to see Zeke and David Montgomery so low. I think this was partially my fault. I do think Monty is a good piece. I think the new offense for Chicago will lead to a two-headed backfield. And so I think Khalil Herbert will have some weeks where he's more valuable than Montgomery. As crazy as that sounds, I think that both of them can thrive in this offense. But I think it's going to look more like the Packers offense where they do use two backs, where Monty is mostly the more valuable guy. But I just don't know if he can finish as an RB1, and I think some of those guys ahead of him can, so it makes sense to me.
That's the other thing I wanted to bring up for Aaron Jones is we're kind of just like taking him off the list, it seems like, and I think that's silly. Like we're taking him off the RB1 list, and I just don't get it. Because when you look back, when you look back at this, and people are scared by the quads of AJ Dillon taking away too many touches, but Aaron Jones is by far the better pass catcher. He's by far the better red zone threat. So for me, I don't give a shit if AJ Dillon gets 30, 40 more carries this year than he did last year, 50, because that means Aaron Jones is fresher and he's getting more passing work.
Which is needed with them losing Deante Adams.
Yeah, and what you're basically telling me is I get you're basically saying that his role is reduced to Austin Eckler.
That's what I was just going to say.
Why are we pissed? Why? That's top 5, guys. That's top 5.
He's my dynasty RB10, and it's only based on his age. I put some younger guys ahead of him. I put Saquon ahead of him because the perceived ceiling. I do think Dillon does eat into his work, but I think that, like you said, I think that's a good thing. Targets have to go somewhere. Aaron Rodgers lost his top 2 targets, and I don't feel confident that Amari Rodgers is going to take a step forward. I feel pretty confident that Christian Watson is not completely ready for a wide receiver 1 role. And so it's Allen Lazard and then, scraps and Robert Tonyan too, I think, coming back. But yeah, Aaron Jones should be a an RB1. So,
yeah.
Granted, these are our consensus rankings, so maybe you shouldn't, but also Randy and I think so, and we're the ones talking on the podcast. So, any other notes on 13 through 24?
Nope.
Do you want to get to 25 to 36?
Yep, next bit. Let's go.
Okay, 25, Leonard Fournette. He was right there. 26, James Conner. 27, A.J. Dillon. 28, James Cook. 29, Kareem Hunt. 30, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. 31, Chase Edmonds. 32, Damian Harris. 33, Rachaad White. 34, Melvin Gordon. 35, Tony Pollard. And 36, James Robinson. Just missing out on our top 36. Devin Singletary at 37, Isaiah Spiller at 38, Ronald Jones at 39, Michael Carter at 40. That's hilarious, Randy. We'll talk about that. Brian Robinson, Alexander Madison, Khalil Herbert, round that out, and then some other guys. But out of this list, Randy, James Conner finished as an RB1 last year, and we have him down at 26. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I am at 25. So I think in redraft he's an RB2. Like it's just dynasty wise, he's older, he's injury prone. He's now going to be given the kind of the bulk again, and I don't know if he can necessarily sustain that. He didn't really sustain it last year either, and he wasn't the bulk. So that's why I have him still a little bit lower. And I think having Fournette and him back to back is the best case scenario for us, because these two are both going to be on championship rosters, but for dynasty purposes, they are, more win now pieces. So when you are more win now piece at this age, you are further down the pecking order. That's just how that works.
Yeah, I think we can toss Kareem Hunt in that realm as well. I think he's starting. You'd be shocked at how old Kareem Hunt is just based on kind of what we've seen from him. He is 26, so he's kind of approaching that cliff where running backs kind of fall off, and his running style, he's approaching it. He's not there yet.
Yeah, it depends on what you define as the cliff for running back, though. So.
Yeah, well, and with Kareem Hunt being in the situation he's in, I think it's worth noting that his upside's always going to be capped as long as Nick Chubb is healthy.
But for some reason, his floor is always set
super high.
So, that's why he's an RB3 here for us, but he's an RB2 again. So, we have all these guys that if they're healthy and they keep this workload, they're absolute studs for your dynasty team this year. And maybe next year as well. But past that, we're not looking at their future. So that's why they're lower on the list. But I think all three are absolute studs this year. Besides that, I think everyone's kind of in the right place. I'm trying to see what I have James Robinson a few spots higher. The biggest thing for me is, okay, so I don't have Rachaad White this high. And I feel like I disrespected him slightly, but I also didn't.
I'm going to fight you then. Okay, let me sell people on Rachaad White, though.
So I'm going to do the baseline for Rachaad White, and then I'm going to let you correct and amplify it. So Leonard Fournette is going to get the bulk of the workload this year. I have Rachaad White at 44.
It's not bad.
It's not bad. I think next year he will be at least an RB3 in the rankings for me. It's just this year where I don't think he gets a good amount of work. At least the first half. I do just struggle to rank him higher. And everyone ahead of him are guys that rotate in every week and have huge upside for handcuff possibility. Where Rachaad White doesn't really have that this year, at least in my opinion. And I also have Cordell Patterson ahead of him, who's again more of that 1 year, 2 year rental. And then I have Isaiah Spiller ahead of him because I think he has more of a defined role right now. So I just have him lower because I think going into this team right now, he is the pass catching running back with a running back that has consistently gotten fed with targets over his career. So while he's not efficient or good at it, in both of our opinions, that doesn't mean he won't get those targets again. So maybe closer to the playoff run, Rachaad White is a way more valuable piece, but coming into the season, I'm just looking to get him on a dynasty roster and hold him. He's definitely maybe a taxi squad candidate as well. So depending on your team, but that's the issue for me with Rachaad White. Why I have him lower?
So that's a lot of people. Like a lot of people push back and say, "Well, Fournette's gotten a lot of targets and he gets them all the time," and that's true. Yeah, absolutely. But there's got to be a reason that they went out and they specifically got one of the best pass catching backs in this class, knowing Gio Bernard's still there, Keyshawn Vaughn's still there for now. He's probably going to get cut now that Bruce Arians is in charge of some of the he's not in charge of the decisions, but he's kind of, I don't know, an advisor or whatever the hell he is. But either way, I think what we're looking at is Rachaad White is the immediate RB2. And when we look at what the RB2 can be in a Tom Brady led offense too, I mean, I think that he is going to be out on the field on third down. People push back on his pass blocking. I don't think it's that bad. I think people saw the PFF grades for pass blocking and said that was bad, but I also don't think the PFF knows how to grade pass blocking for running backs. I'm sorry, PFF. I think that's your area of improvement if you're listening. But so I think Rachaad White's going to be on the field. I think he's more reliable than Leonard Fournette on third downs. And so I think Brady's probably tired of Leonard Fournette in a pass catching role too. As much as he might like Leonard Fournette, he's just so, there's nothing he does after the catch though. Like he catches it and then he takes like 10 steps to get going and then he gets tackled and that's that. And so I don't know. I just feel like Rachaad White will have value this year as like an RB3 flex play at times. And so I'm just trying to get ahead of it. I have him ranked as my RB28 at this point, which is probably
I could not go that high. That's
a little high, probably.
I have him behind all of the handcuffs. I think it's the best way I have it described so far, where I have James Robinson ahead. I have Tony Pollard ahead, Melvin Gordon, Michael Carter, Devin Singletary, Rashad Penny, Ramondre Stevenson, Alexander Madison, Ronald Jones. Like I have all these guys that are in these great situations as handcuffs behind him or ahead of him. And most of those guys have also done something. So especially in the handcuff role. So I think if we're just going how the usage could be and just that played upside, we're not going injury or anything, I'd have him and Melvin Gordon and Michael Carter all ranked kind of next to each other, and Singletary, just as, the rotational third down roles and, more highlighted in that aspect. But until we see them kind of work out in the field together, and the Bucs are definitely a team where I could see them bringing in yet another veteran running back to be the RB2 per se. So that's why I just have them lower for now. I think once we get through this offseason or preseason, I think he's moving up my rankings though.
That's fair. It's definitely fair. I put it out on Twitter and I got absolutely flamed for it, and that's just kind of what Twitter is. But I said I think Rachaad White has top 12 upside in his future, like not in 2022.
Oh yeah, definitely not this year, but
and everyone says, well, Fournette's there next year too, and yeah, but Fournette, he's not old, but he's got a lot of tread on those tires, and so I think there's a world in which White overtakes him next year.
Yeah, so that's where the discussion for Rachaad White goes even further, where Fournette has another year. We don't know. We're almost assuredly thinking Brady does not have another year. We don't have another quarterback that we trust in waiting. So there's so many question marks at this backfield in the future that it's so hard to put him any higher. But opportunity and talent wise, he could. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, for sure. But that is our dynasty running backs. Obviously, I kind of rounded it out to a little past 40 for us, but yeah, and we'll do some more work with our dynasty rankings. We're going to be doing our wide receivers next week. I don't recall which division is accompanying that.
I believe we are doing both wide receiver and tight end rankings next week to pump them through.
Yes, this checks out. I do recall that being a conversation. So we will be doing both of those. And so we'll kind of finalize our dynasty rankings. And then if you guys ever have questions or anything, or just questions on a player that maybe we didn't touch on inside our top 36, because we're only giving 1s, 2s, and 3s, feel free to ask. I do have my dynasty rankings published Working through, I messed up the value chart. I don't know what happened, but it's not right. So still working through that. But I would like to get our consensus ones posted as well, so you could be able to access those as we move forward. And there are a lot of startups still happening. I know there's a little wave right after the NFL draft, but I know I'm dying to get in a couple more at this point. So
We're in one right now. So
we are, and we need to go draft for it. So it's time to go. Randy, do you have anything to add before we bounce?
No, not in particular. I think, I mean, I guess running backs are a weird thing for Dynasty, especially once you get off the top guys. You have to just start trying to kind of bulk together, especially to start up, bulk together some older guys or older guys for running backs, and then have that plan that you need to attack that in the draft in the future, possibly. I think in a lot of startups, your plan has to be either get young quarterback, get young at receiver, get young at running back, and then fight to get back, all the age value that you lost. And that's why a lot of these guys like James Cook and Rashad White that we just went over are so valuable in a startup.
Yes. And especially when, the market may not be where it needs to be on some of those guys at this point. So awesome. Good show. We will be back next week with wide receivers and tight ends. I think we're going to skip.
It's just going to be those. There's no way we can do another thing.
Yeah, we'll skip the depth chart breakdowns, but we will return to those, and then our summer is going to be jam-packed with content. So you know where to tune in. Make sure you guys subscribe. If you're listening to the podcast, subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And then on the YouTube, if you're watching there, check that out and subscribe too. We will be back next Monday. For Randy Hall, I'm Christian Williams. We'll talk to you guys then. Later.